Thanks for joining us again. This is the Word for the Valley podcast. Now, what if God has already been preparing you for the hardest season of your life, and you just didn't realize it? In this section, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a mountain, and for a moment, his glory is unveiled. Moses and Elijah appear, the Father speaks from heaven. This powerful moment would stay with the disciples for the rest of their lives, strengthening them through persecution, suffering, and deep trials. In this episode, we're reminded that God often speaks before the trial comes. The question is, are we listening when He does? Well, let's listen closely as Pastor Mike takes us through this section of Scripture beginning at chapter 16, verse 28.
So as we've been making our way down through chapter 16, there's this progression that Jesus is working into the life of His disciples, where He is bringing them to various experiences so ultimately that they would know who He is. Obviously, the disciples have a lot of mixed response. They have a lot of preconceived notions as to who the Messiah ought to be or what the Messiah ought to do. And it takes some time for the Lord, as it does in all of our lives, to sift out some of those notions, some of those desires, some of those things where we would say, well, if I was God, this is the way that I would do it. Where the Lord has to peel those things off of us, show us other things in an effort to reveal Himself to us as He really is. And it's an interesting process for us. It's challenging. Sometimes even borderline disappointing. Other times elating, these kinds of things as God does this work in our lives to focus us in on Him and to cause us to know who He really is. There's a unique challenge that we all offer to Him in that way. So as we've been working our way through 16, Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus says, "That's right, yes. This has been revealed to you by my Father in heaven." Right on the heels of that, then Jesus gives the details as to what the Messiah, the Christ, ought to be and do. He must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and raised the third day. And then if you want to follow this Messiah, then this is going to be your lifestyle as well. If you desire to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. These are challenging things for the disciples. Again, they thought they had an idea about what the Messiah was going to be and do. And then Jesus come along, hey, listen, the Messiah is going to have to die. No, that's not. And then Peter gets rebuked. Well, if you're going to follow the Messiah, this is going to be your lifestyle. You have to deny yourself. You have to be willing to suffer and take up the things that life puts on you so that you can continue to progress in the things of God. You have to be willing to do that. Well, no, that doesn't sound like the life that I was looking for. That doesn't sound like the fun that I was eagerly anticipating. It doesn't sound right, these kinds of things. But the Lord is saying, no, but this is my way. This is the way this works. Now, on the backside of it is this. He says to them in chapter 16, verse 28, which probably should go better in with the translators had put it in there with chapter 17, because it seems to segue very much into this next scene, where assuredly I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. Now, one of the things on the backside of this that we need to realize in regards to the nature and the person, the way of God's Messiah in Jesus Christ, is that there is a benefit to it on the backside. That there is a glory that this anticipates. There is a home that this is a precursor to. One of the commentators said it this way: walking with Jesus doesn't just mean a life of death and crosses. It also means a life of power and glory of the kingdom of God. But the remarkable thing is that the power and glory has to come in the right manner. It has to come in the right way, and it has to come in the right time. Glory received too quickly, or glory received without sacrifice, oftentimes is a precursor to incredible pride, incredible arrogance, incredible haughtiness. Somebody exalts himself above other people. I don't know what's wrong with you. It's always worked out just fine with me. I don't know what your problem is, but I'm succeeding. I'm walking in this tremendous glory. If it's not compensated or counterbalanced with the right amount of suffering and the right amount of sacrifice, it will most likely yield pride. But if there is the proper amount of sacrifice and the willingness to surrender to the degree that God wants it, then we also have to remember there's a reward on the other side too. there is glory for those who are willing to walk this way. There is a home that we're looking forward to. There is a place that we're looking forward to going to, right? There are people that we've sent ahead. There's a place we're going to be, that we've been made for, that we've been designed for, that this is all anticipating. This is not home. This is temporal. And this is certainly not glory. This is something else. And there's a season to put up with it in some ways, to deal with it. But it's precursoring something else, prefiguring, foreshadowing something else. And that glory is coming. Well, it says now in chapter 17, verse 1, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. Now, most people believe that when Jesus says you're going to see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, that the first hint of that is here in the Transfiguration. Now, this may not be the full extent of that. He may have been alluding to the resurrection when he came back in his new resurrected heavenly body. It may even talk about the ascension that the disciples themselves will participate in. But this is a little taste. Sometimes when life is hard, sometimes when there are difficult things, God almost has to give us a little bit of a taste of what it could be out ahead of us. And just a little vision for it, a little idea of it, just to kind of plant it in our hearts and mind. Listen, the next 3 years of your life are going to be really hard. The next 6 months are going to be harder than you've ever known. And before that, sometimes the Lord will just give us a little bit of a word, a little bit of a hope, a little bit of something out there that will stick in our minds, that it will implant in our hearts, that will carry us through this next season. These disciples are going to see this very same Jesus hang on a cross and die in just a couple months. And this vision will stay with them. Peter will write about it in his second letter in chapter 1. He will write this vision will stay with them to the end of their days here on this earth, and will carry them through those really deep trials, those difficult times. I'm of the firm belief that God will oftentimes and almost always speak into our lives ahead of times before the things that are going to be most difficult in our lives. Like he prepares us. He's a good dad, and he prepares us for the things that are coming. The problem with us most of the time is that we're not listening enough to get what we need in the present. Then we get into the trial and we feel like God's let us down when he hasn't at all. He's been preparing us for that trial the whole time. We just hadn't been listening. But if we're paying attention, he'll give us something that will speak to us in the deepest places here. And this is a little bit of a precursor for the disciples here. Peter and James and John, they'll pass this along to the other disciples eventually as well. So Jesus leads them up onto a high mountain by themselves. So he takes them up on a high mountain, maybe Mount Hermon, maybe Mount Tabor. Some think it's even Mount Meron. A high mountain, meaning they went on a long trip, a long journey. Edersheim in his commentary says even at Mount Hermon, a day's journey from the bottom of the mountain to as far as you could go in a day's journey, you can get up to where at times there's even snow on the ground, which would be interesting in the nation of Israel. So a long journey, a hike, right? This is not for the faint of heart. They're going to have to work here to get up onto this high mountain. He takes them away by themselves. Luke says he takes them away to pray. Now, as for most of us, when there is a designated time of prayer, oftentimes there's a corresponding time of sleeping that seems to go, especially for Peter, James, and John. It seems like that's what they do whenever the Lord calls them away to pray, as they eventually take a nap, fall asleep. And that's what they do here. Luke tells us that they were weary. It was a long day. They made a long trip. They probably got up where it was a little bit cooler. They sat down. The night is starting to descend, right? Starting to get dark. And they're praying. And then they are resting in the Lord. And beautifully, Jesus doesn't reprimand them for it. Now, it'd probably be better if they had stayed awake, because then they wouldn't be surprised by what happens next. But they were not. So it says here in verse 2 that he, Jesus, was transfigured before them. The word is metamorpho. We get our English word metamorphosize or metamorphosis from this Greek word. It means to be transformed from the inside out. That the glory that had been resident inside Jesus, the entire time, yet veiled in his flesh, covered over in human skin. That glory is allowed now to peek out to the outside. One of the commentators said that the miraculous work that happens in the transfiguration is not that the glory is revealed. The miraculous work is that at every other point in Jesus' life, the glory was hidden. That people couldn't see it, couldn't experience it in this way. But here now, the glory is exposed. He is transfigured. He is metamorphosized in front of them. His face shone like the sun, shining bright like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Now, you would think that this would be enough to wake them up. It doesn't seem as if it is quite yet, right? In our bedroom, and by and large, anywhere I go, we were at a hotel over the weekend with Aiden and all. I have to cover over every light that I can see. If the clock light's too bright, I got to put a shirt over top of it or something. Just. But then you get in a hotel now, those stupid blinking lights for the fire, like just. Can we turn that off? But you know that if you get up there and hang something over top of it, it's going to set the alarm off, and then you're going to have stuff all in your hotel room, and then you're going to have to pay the fine for that kind of thing. So you just kind of have to put up with it. Light in the middle of the night, to kind of sleep through this type of thing is pretty significant, and may speak actually to the depth of sleep that Peter, James, and John are in. But they don't stay that way when Moses and Elijah appeared to them. Now they're appearing to Jesus first, but they do appear to Peter, James, and John, talking with Jesus. So they're not apparently awakened by Jesus transfiguring. They're awakened by the dialogue that's going on with Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. Luke tells us that the three of them are talking about the exodus that he will perform for the nation of Israel as their Messiah. No doubt speaking of his death, burial, resurrection, and maybe even his ascension that will lead God's children, God's people, from death to life. The exodus that Christ would deliver in his people, their salvation. Now, it would be remarkable for Moses, who was promised to get into the promised land but never did, to be there finally one time, in the promised land. Elijah here to come back. Did he get the chariot ride back down? To meet with Jesus here in this way? But they're dialoguing with Jesus and speaking to him specifically about his decease, his exodus. Well, then it says in verse 4, Peter answered, which would be a better thing maybe if he had been asked a question. Now, what we find in Mark and the other Gospels is that they were sleeping. Peter, James, and John, they were sleeping. They awaken to see the three, Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, in this conversation. Jesus still in his transfigured state, the glory shining from Jesus. We don't know if Moses and Elijah are shining in the same way. Peter is awakening out of sleep. It says in the other Gospels, he doesn't know what else to say. And so then he just says something. Peter is that guy. When he doesn't have something to say, he makes something up. It's just the way he goes. And usually he ends up saying the wrong thing. I think one of the reasons why we like Peter is he ends up speaking whatever's on the top of his head. And in that, we get to see probably what we were thinking, but we're too embarrassed to actually say out loud. Every class needs a Peter, right? You're in calculus, and everybody wants to act like they're smart, right? But we had one in our class, and he would ask questions all the time. Everybody in the class was thankful that he asked the questions that we were all thinking about. He looked dumb, we felt smart. But he was probably the smart one. We were probably the dumb ones. But he would ask the questions all the time. Hey, Matt, good job. I needed that question. Matt, would you ask this question for us next time? Okay, we don't have no idea what we're doing in this kind of thing. And he would always do it. Oh, Peter is that guy. He doesn't know what else to say, so he says this. He says, Lord, it is good for us to be here. Now, I find that so ironic and oxymoronic, it's remarkable the natural affinity that we have to make ourselves the center of attention of whatever that we're a part of. Joe Focha said this time and time again. He said, if I would take a picture of the sanctuary on a Sunday morning, there are 3,000 people at a Calvary Philly service. I would take a picture on a Sunday morning, and before we would all leave, I would have that picture on the back wall before you could go. Everybody would walk out and specifically look for one person, themselves. And remarkably, in a crowd of 3,000, if you had 2,999, perfect, looking at the camera, smiling the right way, they felt all real good about themselves in that picture. But you had one person that didn't like how they were smiling or how they looked. They burn the whole thing. We need a new picture. The guy, for the sake of themselves, they would want everything else taken away. Let's do that again or something. Can you crop another face in there for me or something? They would want something fixed merely for themselves. It's remarkable how we oftentimes have this incredible tendency of making ourselves the center of attention. I think one of the things we all need to learn in life is that the world does just not center around you. It doesn't revolve around you. You're not the center of the universe. We're living in such a subjective culture, subjective environment right now, that everybody believes that if something is bad with them, they just have to fix everything around them so that they're okay. Right? I just need to change the definition of this. I just need to change my friends. I just need to make sure everybody else treats me in this way. I need to set up my environment so that they treat me exactly the way that I want to be treated so that I can feel comfortable. That's nonsense. It's hogwash. Clearly unproductive. And it's going to be harmful by and large. You're not the center of the universe. It's not our job to get everybody to comply with us. It's actually our job to comply with Jesus, and then everything else can fall in line. That's the bottom line. But here, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. 3 tabernacles. He's looking at setting up little shrines. He's not asking to build a house here on the top of this mountain. He's asking to set up some type of memorial. Now, there have been times in the Bible, we just saw it recently with Jacob there at Bethel, where memorials are established as kind of commemorations of a particular kind of event that God has done in a person's life. A memorial is not always bad. The problem for Peter is that he's setting up a memorial, or he wants to set up a memorial, and he's missing the main point in actually establishing the memorial. He's trying to enshrine an experience. He's trying to capture this experience of God in a way that perpetuates it forever and ever. Now, I find this particularly interesting in light of some of the discussions that the commentators get into on where the transfiguration actually took place. It's remarkable that people have really strong opinions. It has to be this mountain. And I find that interesting because God doesn't tell us what mountain it is. And I think God doesn't tell us what mountain it is on purpose. Because if we knew what mountain it was, we would go and build the shrine for Peter, right? I mean, the Roman Catholic Church and Constantine and his mom, they tried to do that. There have been people who've actually tried to go and build the shrines and establish the things and make this happen. And they know which mountain it is, and they're going to go and set up some type of plaque, some type of memorial, and then we can go back and rub the statue's toe until whatever it falls off or something. They want to actually do this, and it is a perfect example of missing the point. They're not here to build shrines. They're not here to try to immortalize in some ways an experience. They have a Jesus in their midst. They're experiencing his heavenly glory. And Peter's like, "Hey, should we build a grotto? Should we build a shrine? Should we do? And I'll do 3 of them. I promise. We'll do one for each of you." And just missing the point entirely. So while he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him." Hear him is constantly be listening, constantly be hearing him. Now, I'm sure God doesn't ever say, shut up to you. I'm probably not a nice thing for God to say. But this is as close probably as it gets in regards to one of his disciples, where the Lord actually looks at Peter and says, "Peter, you should probably just stop talking right now. Actually, I don't really want to hear you either, Peter. What you should actually be doing is that you should actually be looking to Jesus and listening to him. Why don't you just listen to him? Stop talking, just listen to him." And God puts Peter in his place. This is a firm rebuke. This is actually a really strong word of God. We're going to find at the end of it that the disciples are on their faces, they are afraid. This is a heavy voice. This is a firm voice. This is not advisement. This is, "Well, Peter, if you want to get along well, you should probably do it this way." That is not what this is. This is a heavy voice. This is a powerful appearance of God. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Be listening to him. Be paying attention to him. Be listening to him. You're missing it. It's interesting that in Peter's desire to establish a shrine, a memorial in some ways, that what he was actually doing is he was moving away from the relationship that God intended him to have with Jesus from the very beginning. I think one of the things that we really need to come to grips with, by and large, is really what does relationship mean in our lives, and how do we build good relationships? Because I think one of the things that we really struggle with as human beings is that we replace relational connectivity, we replace that with experiences. And we think that if we have particular kind of experiences with people, that we're going to be close. And it just doesn't work that way. I said this a couple weeks ago in our marriage workshop, and I've been reminded of it a couple times since. If somebody comes to me and says, we've been working on our marriage, or our marriage isn't all that good, and so what we're going to do is we're going to take a special trip. If it's a cruise, I'm like, well, let's just sign the divorce papers right now. I've heard it so many times. We need to make a special trip to kind of save our marriage. And listen, your marriage didn't break up. Your marriage didn't struggle on a cruise. It ain't going to get fixed on a cruise. It isn't a special experience that you need, because you're going to have to come back to life. You're going to have to come back to the day-to-day grind. You're going to have to come back to this house or these things. That's not how a relationship is fixed with particular kinds of experiences, or nice experiences, or good experiences, or dramatic experiences. A relationship is fixed by sitting down and dialoguing, one heart sharing with another, and the person who's being shared to is listening and hearing. And what God desires here is he's not desiring to grant them a miraculous experience that they can memorialize, that they can enshrine forever for the rest of their lives or for the rest of the history of the church. What he's doing is he's giving them a glimpse into who he really is, so that they would know this, and that it would sit something in their hearts and in their lives for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their ministries here on earth. But what it should be doing is it should be drawing them nearer to him. Not some memory of him. Not some idea of him. How ridiculous would it be, right? If I'm away, I have on my phone a few pictures of my family, a few pictures of my wife. Lovely little things. I have a running set that go up on my screensaver, and I had one up on the weekend, and I came up, and it was Evan holding little Aiden, and Evan's 3 and Aiden's less than 1, and Evan's just got this humongous smile on his face, like I don't know what he had just done to his brother, but kind of. And it was so sweet. Oh, Julie, look at them. Remember when they were like this? Yeah, we don't remember everything else that was going into that picture, but that kind of thing, right? And how ridiculous would it be if, while my children are with me, that all I want to do is look at the picture of my kids when they were 3 or 2 or 1. and not actually be with my own children. Last Sunday, some of you guys have asked. We had a great pizza party. It was great. Domino's is what heaven requested. I don't get it either. It's like Domino's is cardboard with a little bit of cheese and sauce on top, right? That's like, but it's cheap, so that's way. It's like, oh, I want Domino's pizza. So we went out and got Domino's pizza, and all sat at the kitchen table except Julie. She watched from the couch, but sat and ate our pizza and laughed and joked and had a great time, and then sent the kids back to college. But that's but we had just something so simple and so easy, but just to be all there together and to talk and to relate and to connect, right? To listen, and hopefully in all of the directions necessary. Relationship is not a shrine. It's not a memorial. It's not a special event. Wedding days are great, but a marriage is not built on a wedding day. There are a lot of people with really great weddings, and their marriages just don't last very long, right? There are a lot of kids whose parents throw tremendous birthday parties for them, but actually aren't there almost any other day of the week. And that birthday party means nothing. It's actually a farce. It's phony. It's hypocrisy, right? To try to do something in an event, to try to do something apart from relationship, is actually exactly what God does not want. What he wants this to build into their relationship. He wants this experience to make them want to know him more, to listen to him more, to pay more attention to Jesus. And that's actually worked the other way. So Peter has to be corrected. And God does that for him, thankfully. Now, when the disciples heard it in verse 6, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. They hear the voice of God. Now, it's remarkable, right? They're not afraid at the transfiguration of Jesus. They're not afraid when Moses, Elijah, and Jesus are having a conversation. They're not afraid there. They're blabbing their greatest idea off to Jesus at that point in time. They're afraid when the glory cloud comes in and God comes upon them in a way to humble them, to settle them. One of the things we're watching in Jacob's life on Wednesday evening is that there is a 20-year gap between Bethel in Jacob's life and Penuel. There's a 20-year gap. And in that 20 years, it's frustration, difficulty, and a blessing. Certainly, the nation of Israel grows out of Jacob during that particular time. There's a lot of great things that happen. But the thing is that's particularly interesting is that the experience of God at Bethel wasn't enough to humble Jacob. In some ways, it almost seemed to do the opposite. It gave him pride. It gave him some type of verification, vindication from God, as if he was the right one. There is a world of difference in our lives between having an experience of God and being humbled by God. And there's a lot of people that speak of having an experience of God, and in some ways it exalts them. It makes them prideful. It makes them arrogant. It makes them as if they are like the cream of the crop and everybody else is lesser than them. And that's exactly the wrong way to approach the Lord. It really speaks into question, maybe by and large, what kind of experience somebody's actually had. Maybe of a different spirit altogether. The true kind of experience of God and the disciple, when they finally hear it, it says they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid, which is the position that everybody takes in the Bible when they really, truly have met with the Lord. They fall on their faces. And there is a fear, a reverence to his glory, to his grandeur that happens, that I think ought to be a mark of a true believer. It's kind of the thing that sets them apart in some ways. There is a reverence of God. They know him. They've experienced him in this way. Well, Jesus beautifully comes to them in verse 7 and touched them and said, "Arise, do not be afraid." Now, he will do this later for John in the book of Revelation. John himself will go down before the glorified Christ there in chapter 1. And Jesus will come to him again, put his hand on his shoulder. Don't be afraid. You almost think like, you've heard this before, John. Isn't it great? Arise, do not be afraid. And look, when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Which is the whole point of the entire experience. Is that they should come to know Jesus himself, who Jesus is, what he does, how he acts, kind of his nature from the inside out. They saw no one but Jesus only.
We learn that Peter wanted to capture the moment and preserve the experience. But in doing that, he was moving away from what God intended all along. Not a memorial, but a relationship. God gave them a glimpse of glory, not so that they could enshrine it, but so that something would settle deep in their hearts. Something that would carry them through persecution, suffering, and the deep trials ahead. The mountain wasn't meant to replace the relationship, it was meant to deepen it. So whatever God may reveal to you, let it anchor you, not to an experience of him, but to him. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for listening to the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.